In-laws are petitioning for custody of our kids. Background. My mother has historically been a just no. I'm sure I'll be posting about her in the future. I believe that she has some type of cluster B personality disorder, either narcissistic or histrionic, are my best guesses. I cycled between being the forgotten child and the scapegoat, and my only sibling, my younger brother, was decidedly the golden child. We were both adopted as infants. We were also very poor. Experiences growing up in this environment have led to me having a long history with depression, anxiety, and possibly PTSD, working on finding a therapist to figure that out. When I was 19, I packed everything I owned into my crappy car and drove 1,300 plus miles to live with extended family and get away from my parents. My childhood also had a direct and distinct impact on how I want to raise my children. But my philosophy can be summed up with the statement, if a child knows that they are loved and supported unconditionally, then they will excel. Recent background. I have at least one undiagnosed autoimmune condition. Working theory is either RA and Crohn's or lupus. I use marijuana medicinally for these conditions, but we live in a non-legal state. My husband and I have been married for 7.5 years. We have a daughter who is 6.5 and a son who will be 5 in a few months. We adore our children, they are amazing little humans, and are growing up to be incredibly kind, respectful, and driven. I cannot list all the reasons I love, respect, and admire these babies of ours. We have not been great with money through our marriage, and have ended up living with my SO's parents a few times. This story starts during one of those times, while we were saving up for a deposit on a nice house to rent with a yard. Our daughter was about to start kindergarten, and we decided it was time to figure out where we wanted to live, get into a nice place, and stay there so that our daughter and eventually our son can have a great, consistent school experience. Last thing you need to know, the in-laws are very LDS, Mormons, and we are very not. Now, finally, for the actual story. The area of the in-laws' home that we were living in was 2 unfinished rooms in the basement. It was a temporary situation, 3 months max. We were living out of boxes, and over half our stuff was still in boxes. In-laws start complaining that the place is messy. Duh. We're living out of boxes with 2 kids, in a cement box. No electric except with extension cords, no running water, just a toilet. We also weren't allowed to take our trash to the outdoor trash can until the morning of garbage day, so we would end up with closed bags of trash by the door for half the week. We tried to explain this to Mill to no avail. Next, Mill starts in on our parenting. More specifically, my parenting. Because fathers have no say in how their kids are raised, right? Facepalm. She criticizes that we don't have health insurance for the kids. We were working on getting them onto CHIP. Claims the kids haven't been to the dentist. They had been, but the work required was going to be thousands of dollars due to daughter being born with little to no enamel and son being a stubborn turd monster that hated having his teeth brushed, hence the CHIP. Claimed that I sleep and play video games all day, on the bad pain depression days, yes to an extent, but never ignoring my children. Said that I don't teach the kids anything, patently false, and basically just called me a lazy, terrible mother. Threw the neglect word around a few times. We listened politely through her abuse, tried to make peace with her, and made plans to move up our let's get the fuck out of here timeline. A few days after this family meeting, which is just her way of saying, sit here quietly while I shit all over you, the in-laws decided to search our living space without asking or even informing us. While I have found conflicting information about the legality of that, we definitely felt that our privacy had been invaded. They found our boxed-up liquor cabinet, a handful of empty beer cans, and a bit of ash in the trash can. They fucking lost it. Immediately accused me of being an alcoholic. If I was an alcoholic, wouldn't all the booze be gone? Not sitting basically untouched in a box for 2 months? Called the cops to have the ash tested. Inconclusive. Called the cops again. No idea why. The cop didn't understand either. The police reports are hilarious. Finally asked my husband if I use marijuana. He confirmed that I do, and explained why. His mother gave him 3 options. Hubs and I get kicked out. Kids stay with the in-laws. Not happening. We all stay, but they install security cameras on the stairs to monitor our comings and going, and conduct nightly inspections. Slightly better option, at least we're together. Hubs divorces me and has me arrested. This one's pretty self-explanatory and left my cool, collected husband shaking with anger. They call another family meeting. I left in the middle because it was just them telling me how I'm a terrible human. We moved out ASAP, found a place on a Friday, moved in that same Sunday at the end of July. Got a puppy, settled in. Life was good. Well, for about a week and a half. A few days after moving in, MIL texts my husband asking for our new address so that she can send us something. We're trying to go low contact at this point, so he tells her we'll pick it up instead. 2 days later, I get a text from our cell provider alerting me that location tracking has been turned in for just my number. We were working on getting off the in-laws' phone plan, so we're irritated that they got our address, but blow it off. Then, on August 1st, we got served. They filed in juvenile court for full, permanent custody if an abused or neglected child. I immediately had the worst panic attack of my life. To this day, I'm amazed that I didn't end up in the hospital. Since then, it's been court dates, mediation, court-ordered visitation, and a pile of manipulative lies and exaggerations from them. The guardian ad litem, the lawyer the courts appointed for the kids, has been super helpful and is firmly on our side. Unfortunately, they filed the petition in a very specific way so that we could not be appointed a lawyer, so we are going through all of this pro se, representing ourselves. They have also called CPS at least one additional time since the case was opened. CPS is on our side too. The most terrifying episode was when they tried to blindside us at a pretrial hearing with an expedited temporary custody order by using fabricated evidence and trying to prove that we use actual drugs like cocaine, meth, and ketamine. Neither my husband nor myself have ever even seen those drugs, let alone used them. I'm sure I'm missing info, long as this is. Ask me anything. I'll do my best to answer honestly. I know we're not perfect parents, but our kids are happy, healthy, and most importantly, they know just how much we love them. I'm not even sure what I'm looking for here. I guess just venting. Advice is still welcome, though. Update 1. It's been about a week since the kids last had visitation with this monster and enabler victim FIL. Not sure if it's possible to be both. I may expand on his part in this later on Just No Family, but I just can't bring myself to feel anger towards him. Honestly, I just feel pity. It has taken until now for me to feel calm enough to post this. First, the annoying story. As part of Dee Dee's Halloween costume, B bought her a pair of knee-high black boots. DS recently grew out of his shoes, so he also has nice new Vans high top. Both shoes have suede on the outside, and we spent about $55 between the two pairs. Got a DS's for a steal, but this is still a lot of money for us. The first snow of the year had already started falling the night before visitation. I promise this is pertinent. MIL insists on taking the kids to church, and until this mess is figured out, there is nothing I can do to stop it. So that the kids are comfortable, and to keep the peace, we've been sending the kids in appropriate clothes for whatever activities they have planned, including church. So I sent them with nice clothes, and their nicest shoes. As described above, I don't want our kiddos feeling out of place, just so that I can be petty. Because I actually care about our children unlike this fuckstick. So I always have them wearing whatever they need for that day, and send pajamas, church clothes, a few toys, and maybe an extra set of clothes so they don't have to wear church clothes all day. I want them to be as comfortable as possible. Well, they come back home, and first I discover that MIL has forgotten to return a large clothing item again. This has happened the last 3 visitation. I have tried to be patient, but this is now feeling like a power move to me. Then next thing I discovered was half their clothes soaking wet in a grocery bag. Annoying. Warn us there's wet clothes in the bag, but whatever. Finally, because apparently I'm slow, I check their shoes. Completely soaked. So I asked Dee Dee why everything was wet. This disrespectful cunt wipe let them play in the snow for an extended period of time in their nice clothes and dress shoes. #1. Those are not snow boots. Poor babies were freezing for the rest of the night because their little feet had no real protection from the snow. Also, shoes are wearable, but damaged. All the suede is gone. Tall boots don't stand up on daughters' calves properly, and we won't be able to resell them. Which is the only way we can afford clothes that don't make them look homeless. So I'm pissed off and frustrated about that. It sounds dumb, but we work really hard to ensure that our kids have nice things. We regularly go without, and we're okay with that. But the level of disrespect they have shown for us and our things? Ugh. Not to mention that all they had to do was respond to our "what do they need for this weekend?" question with X, Y, and Z. Maybe send snow stuff just in case. My plan for the next visitation, hopefully the last one, is to send a very detailed and very patronizing checklist of every single item I have sent them with. I plan to include a disclaimer that if they can't get their shot together and send everything back, then we will need it back by the next day, driven down to us and dropped off. No contact will be allowed at these drop-offs. I have also told Dee Dee that she should only play in the snow with her snow boots, as well as assuring her that I'm not upset. And I'm proud of her for doing as she was told, and being a good listener. Now for the shaking with rage fury story. Usually, when the kids come back from visitation, DS says he wasn't ready to come home yet. This hurts, but he is only 4, doesn't understand, and who can really blame him? Eating whatever you want, fun expensive activities that we can't afford, Grandma and Grandpa fawning over you for 33 straight hours. That's all he sees, I get it. Dee Dee usually comes home and talks about how much she missed us, how she was gone for such a long time, in a fake exhausted voice, adorable little drama queen, etc., etc. Well, this past week, she came home and told us she wasn't ready to come home yet. Because this was out of character, I asked her why. Her exact words were, "Because Grandma misses me so much." Not because she misses her grandma, no, because Grandma misses her. This black hole of misery had made my 6-year-old feel responsible for her 50-something-year-old emotions. I am livid. I'm also not sure if I responded properly. I told her, "Oh baby, Mommy and Daddy miss you when you're gone too." I am not proud of this. In hindsight, I realized that it was not the proper response. The last thing I want to do is put more stress on her. I am going to find a time today to sit down with her and have a conversation about how other people feel is not your fault. Responsibility, but I'm unsure of how to explain this to a 6-year-old. Any advice would be appreciated. I feel like I'm trapped in a nightmare and it will never be over. I wish with every bone in my body that we could retain a lawyer and just hand everything over to them. But since that's not an option, we'll just keep trudging along, I suppose. Update 2. A thing that I should have made clearer during the last update is that during that time, we had signed a 3-month agreement with these people to try and avoid trial. I mentioned it in a comment, but didn't want to go into all the details for legal anonymity reason. I want to give a bit more information about that. Sometime in Oct, FIL reached out to us. He said that they wanted to sign an agreement instead of going to trial. We were apprehensive, but desperate to avoid trail. Pre-trial day comes around, and we met with the Shitsticks lawyer a few minutes prior to the court-ordered mediation scheduled for that day. They had fired their previous lawyer, or couldn't afford him anymore, who knows, and their new attorney was much easier to work with. He showed us the agreement they were proposing, asked what parts we objected to, what level of compromise we would be willing to meet at, all that jazz. The original agreement was a total disaster, with Morminster obviously trying to stretch her power to see how far she could push us. The most offending point was the part where she wanted us to sign HIPAA waivers for both kids. This bitch wanted unlimited access to their medical information. The kicker? There was no definitive endpoint to the agreement. It was proposed in a way that the agreement itself was for X amount of time, and after it was over, the Shitsticks could decide if they wanted to negotiate another agreement, drop the case, or go to trial. Obviously, I told them to fuck off about the HIPAA waivers. Not a chance in hell. But we got the agreement to something that we could live with, and then walked into mediation, expecting a quick resolution. Obviously, if that had happened, I wouldn't be telling this story. After sitting down with the mediator, Morminster's attorney explained that before we could sign the agreement, we would need to adjudicate the original petition. Obviously, we asked what that meant. I'll tell you what it means. It means admitting on the record that we were either abusive, neglectful, or, can't remember the word, that through no fault of our own, we were incapable of properly caring for our children. As soon as we heard this, we flat out refused. I immediately recognized what kind of repercussion that could have down the road if they decided to try this shit again. After a lot of back and forth, they revealed that there was another option, a voluntary agreement. No admitting we did something wrong, just signing the paper in good faith, without a court order. We signed that agreement for 3 months. The next pretrial date was set for mid-February. Obviously, we didn't know what would happen after 3 months, but it gave us time to save money for a potential lawyer, time to plan, and time to breathe. It also gave our state time to sign our newly passed medical marijuana bill into law. We continued to send the kids to visitation and tried to just live our lives. In mid-January, FIL reached out to us again. He told us that they wanted to dismiss the case, provided that they weren't cut off from the kids. He also said that the timing, length, and frequency of any visitations would be at our discretion. We were also told that the hearing date would be cancelled. After discussing it, we decided that we could live with that for now and asked FIL to send over the paperwork. And then we waited. And waited. And you guessed it, waited some more. The court date was scheduled for a Wednesday. We finally got the paperwork on Friday evening, only allowing 2 business days to get everything signed and submitted to the court. So we rushed. Monday morning, DH took the paperwork, signed it, and had it notarized. Tuesday morning, he left it in my purse so that I could do the same. I took the paperwork with me when I dropped DS off at preschool, and then headed toward the bank when my gut stopped me. I very suddenly realized that I had barely even read these papers. So I decided to be overly cautious and headed home first to give them a final once-over. That was the single best decision that I have ever made in my entire life. In bold, the title of the document read, Stipulated Petition for Visitation. It stated that we would agree on visitation, but that if we didn't, it would default to the first Saturday of every month from 7 p.m. until noon on Sunday, and from noon to 4 on the third Saturday of every month. It also cited the Grandparents' Rights Code. At that moment, my heart sunk into my toes and my stomach jumped to my throat. I was minutes away from signing that document. How could I have been so careless? These are my children, and I almost ruined everything by not doing my due diligence. I lost it, had a panic attack, and then went into crisis mode. Suddenly, we had a court appearance that we had to be ready for by the next afternoon. I scrambled, found childcare for both kids, found someone to cover my shift at work, and made sure we had all of our documentation together. Tuesday evening, FIL texted DH and asked if we had gotten the paper signed. We said that we had not and would not, and that we would see them at the hearing. Wednesday morning, the day of the fucking hearing, Mormonster herself texts DH. She tells him that they cannot appear because FIL scheduled a doctor's appointment, and she doesn't want to go by herself. DH basically tells her, okay, not our problem. She tells him that they are going to try and get it rescheduled. I call the gal, inform them of what is happening, and reaffirm that we will still be there. Now, we live almost an hour away from the assigned courthouse, and there was a winter storm warning in effect. The gal, being the amazing woman that she is, requests from the court that we be allowed to teleconference in, due to the weather and the fact that Mormonster has said she isn't going to show up. If she doesn't, the whole hearing will just be a continuance and be rescheduled. A few hours later, DH gets another text from Mormonster, freaking out because she can't reach her lawyer. Wow, must suck to have to deal with legal shit all on your own, without your fancy attorney for a few hours. You know, like you forced us to do for 6 months, huh, Mormonster? Per S. She then accidentally sends DH a text meant for her lawyer. She was 100% in panic mode, and man, was I living for it. The appointed time finally comes, and we pick up the phone. We are surprised to learn that Mormonster had finally reached her lawyer, and had even showed up with him. Such bravery. Per S. The judge begins by asking to be updated, and their lawyer speaks up first. Now, let me state now that I hold no ill will against this guy. He was just doing his job, and I can't fault him for that. He explains to the judge that we all thought that we had come to an agreement, but we hadn't signed it yet. He didn't know why, and he wasn't sure why. Basically, trying to insinuate that we were holding everything up and wasting the judge's time. Then it was my turn. I explained what FIL had originally told us, that we had only gotten the paperwork on Friday, hadn't had time to consult with an attorney, and that we were taken aback at the difference between what had been discussed and what was in the paperwork. I went on to explain that I was not comfortable signing anything that required me to allow anyone regular access to my children, especially with such frequency. I reiterated that I was willing to take steps to continue the relationship between my children and their grandparents, but that I was not okay with a court order defining that relationship. And then I brought up the Grandparents' Rights Code. I stated that none of the requirements of that statute had been met by Mormonster, especially the last point, which states that one parent must have either A, been found to be neglectful or abusive by the court, or B, is absent. I calmly stated that obviously neither of these conditions applied, and I didn't understand why Mormonster and her attorney would have included that section of code. I said that I was willing to make a good faith promise that they could continue to see the kids, but that I wouldn't be signing a visitation agreement. I fully thought we would end up going to trial. The judge let me finish speaking, confirmed a few things that I said, and then Mormonster piped up. She didn't understand what I was talking about. The judge explains. She still doesn't get. Judge tries to explain again, asks me to summarize, and I do. Mormonster says, I guess I'm still confused, but continue, or something along those lines. Judge asks for the gal opinion. They basically reiterate our position. And then, one of the highlights of my life happened. The judge say, gal, write up the paperwork for dismissal. Include that there is no court-ordered visitation. In that moment, the stress of the past 6 months, the fear of losing my children, the self-doubt of, maybe she's right, maybe I'm a terrible mother, all of it hit me like a ton of bricks. My knees gave out. I clung to my husband, hyperventilating and crying and laughing and yelling. It was the weirdest emotional response I've ever had. They waited exactly 1 week before texting us to set up a schedule for visits. We are in the process of writing them a lengthy email, explaining that there will be no schedule, but that we will try to allow them to see the kids once a month. We also want to use this as an opportunity to set down some rules and consequences. For example, they are not to take the kids to church under any circumstances. They use their beliefs to upend our entire life, and they will not bring our children around that kind of hatred, intolerance, and judgmental thinking. Please, kind Redditors, jump in if you have any other boundary recommendation. They will only get 1 strike, 1 single misstep, and Mormonster can kiss our children goodbye forever. Also, for those of you worried about continued visitation and exposure to these horrible people, fear not. We will be moving out of state, about 15 hours away, as soon as our lease is up this summer. Obviously, we will not continue monthly visits, but Mormonster and FIL won't know about the move until we take the kids for their last visit to say goodbye. Depending on their behavior, we will consider allowing them to see the kids once or twice a year. Update 3, Part 1. Part of the 3-month agreement stated that Mormonster and FIL would pay for DS's preschool. He attends a cute little in-home preschool with the sweetest teacher. I had told the teacher the entire story before we even enrolled DS. I wanted to make sure that if Mormonster contacted her, that the teacher would feel comfortable and capable of shutting her down. I also wanted to warn her that she might be harassed, albeit very politely, by a crazy woman. She was up for the challenge and very supportive of us. She even told me that she has a close family member who medicates with cannabis. Mormonster was to pay via Venmo. To absolutely no one's surprise, Mormonster messages the teacher on Venmo when she paid for the first month. To her credit, she was polite and simply asked how DS was doing in the class. The teacher diplomatically replied, "He's a great kid. We love having him in our class." All was quiet. The next month, the teacher messages Mormonster on Venmo to remind her of the discount structure. The more months you pay for at once, the greater the discount. Mormonster pays for 3 months to get the discount, and again asks the teacher how DS was doing in class. The teacher gives essentially the same vague response as before. Mormonster thanks her and tells her that the reason that she only paid for 1 month initially is because she wanted to make sure it was a good fit, and she wanted to make sure that DS was actually attending. These are both utterly ridiculous statements because, 1. How on God's green earth would this bitch know if it's a good fit? She only sees him once a month, she barely knows the child, can't understand him when he talks, has never met his teacher or seen any of his schoolwork. 2. Even if she thought it wasn't a good fit, too bad. Not your decision to make, Mormonster. 3. Of fucking course. He's attending. Also, congrats on your Nobel Peace Prize in passive-aggressive insults. Of course I was livid and mildly insulted, but there wasn't much we could do except document and let the gal know. Part 2. So this afternoon, I picked DS up from preschool. His teacher pulled me aside and let me know that she had heard from Morminster again. Morminster had asked if payment was due again yet. We haven't been planning on her paying for the last 2 months of school, but we weren't going to stop her if she did. I would prefer to pay for it ourselves, but we're already so stretched that it's putting our moving plans in jeopardy. The teacher told her that it's not due yet, but she can send a Venmo invoice when it is. Then Morminster started asking questions. How's DS doing? Is he doing kindergarten prep yet? Is he going to be ready for kindergarten, or is he going to need to repeat pre-K? The teacher responded with a similar generic response to last time, followed by, I can't give you any more information than that, as you're not his parent. Guys, I am fucking pissed. I know it's not a huge boundary stomp, and it's nowhere near bad as what she's done before, or what others have done here. But Jesus Christ, just back the fuck off, woman. I don't understand how it's so incredibly difficult to keep your ugly face out of our goddamn business. I haven't even processed enough to figure out exactly why I'm so mad, past the obvious, of course. We've been procrastinating writing the email to outline the rules, and now I'm glad we did, since we have a new rule to add. I thought it would be common sense, but naive little me forgot that there is no common sense with these people.